Welcome back, everybody. We have made it to the final lesson of Unit 1, and that is going to be 1.11 or 1.11, food chains and food webs. And again, we're going back to that elementary school, middle school, science type stuff, making sure we have a foundational knowledge to build on. I promise you the rest of this year will not be this elementary and this review-like. But I also will promise you that there's going to be a lot more lessons that are longer than these short little lessons that we've had recently. So it's kind of a blessing and a curse. There's some new stuff coming, but hey, it's also going to take you some time to cover. So let's go through, what does the College Board expect us to know at the end of this? Can you describe? Again, very, very simple active verb there. Describe meaning not too in-depth, but just kind of just the basic understanding. Food chains, food webs, and their constituent members by trophic levels. Yeah, you can do it already, but I'm just going to review it with you. What's the difference between a food chain and a food web? Well, hopefully you know this, but if you do not know this, let me kind of quickly go through it. Food chains and food webs, first off, what do they have in common? Well, what they do is they show the energy and how energy transfers through an ecosystem. So what we're talking about is, how do we go from trophic level to trophic level, or specifically within an ecosystem, what consumes what? So we're talking about what organism eats what. A food chain is going to show the direct path. This organism eats this organism, eats this organism. A food web is going to show the interconnectedness. Now, here's the thing about interconnectedness. Interconnectedness being a big word, messy word. Ecosystems and food webs are not clean. You're never going to have a beautifully drawn food web that is absolutely perfect, because there's always going to be another organism that consumes this, that, and it gets complicated. Understand that they are very complicated. If you were to draw a true food web of an ecosystem, even if it's just Idlewood, just our little forest area, just drawing the food web alone, it would probably have 70, 80, 90 very obvious members, and then probably upwards of a couple hundred lesser known organisms in there. So it gets very, very complicated. Usually what we see are much small abbreviated food webs to just kind of show some of the interconnectedness. Now, why do we do this? Well, one, it helps us to show what organisms are incredibly important within an ecosystem. It also will help us to see what impacts certain organism populations will have within an ecosystem. So it's really important to see the connectedness of everything. So here's a look at an example food chain. The idea that you go from solar energy and you're going to work your way up through your producers, then your primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary consumer, and all the way up. All right. Comparing terrestrial to an oceanic, it's pretty easy. Hopefully you understand that. The big takeaway from this is, look at the arrows. The arrows in between organisms. The arrows in between the organisms point in the direction from prey to predator, from consumed to consumer. It goes up the trophic level. Why does that arrow matter? That arrow is representing the flow of energy. Energy is going from the lower trophic level to the upper trophic level. If you remember the previous lesson, which I surely hope you do, we're only actually getting 10% of that energy to transfer up each time. All right, so make sure you understand that simple concept. A food web is going to go through the same kind of idea. What we're seeing here is multiple organisms, what eats what, and it's all connected. This is more of an illustration showing you kind of just some of the simplicity of it. All right, when in real life, it's a little bit more like this, really complicated. And what we're seeing now from a complicated food web like this, you see which organisms have an impact on many other organismal populations. So you can see different producers all down here. These are all different types of trees or grasses or shrubs or herbs, different things like that. Your fungi being your decomposers, yes, they kind of don't really fit in really well into a food web, but just understand that everything will eventually cycle back to your fungi. And then you have your different primary consumers. So here we have some ptarmigans, which are birds, snowshoe hare, your small mammals, ground squirrels, rodents, various things like that. Predatory birds over here, predatory mammals over here. And now, how does this all factor into forming something we identify as a keystone species? Well, a couple things. When we look at this, A keystone species is an organism that has an impact on more organismal populations, and it has an impact greater than its population. So we're looking for an organism that has a greater impact than its population kind of is perceived within the ecosystem. In this ecosystem, which we're looking at, first off, this is a boreal forest ecosystem, is the lynx. The lynx has one of the greatest ecological impacts here. Why? Well, it's going to control these predator populations, but it also controls some of these populations. If lynx disappear, what happens? Well, you see these populations will increase. Then these populations will increase. Remember, we talked about predator-prey cycling in the very first unit here. If we got rid of the lynx, we'd see these predator populations. Now, these predators want to consume these, so these start to disappear. Maybe then these populations start to grow. And it can take all sorts of different paths through here. So it's really important to understand that it can be incredibly important to understand how organisms interact. Because if we start to lose an organism like the lynx, well, how is the ecosystem going to rebound? Are these populations going to increase so much that they start to consume some more of the plants and then the producers start to die off? And if our producers start to die off, now can we support that high of a population of primary consumers, secondary consumers, tertiary consumers? If not, it can lead to something called a trophic cascade. The idea that a disturbance to the ecosystem can cause a collapse of that ecosystem. Now, in this situation, the lynx is also the top of the food web, which means it's what we can refer to as an apex predator. It's at the very, very top of that food web. It's at the top of the food chains if you were to draw food chains through here. All right, so that is also an apex predator. It's a keystone species that happens to be an apex predator. So hopefully you understand this idea and the big connection between everything. Now, shifting gears to a slightly different topic, feedback loops. Now, why did I switch gears there? Why did I kind of bring this different topic in? Well, feedback loops are important because much like I was just talking about that food web and the interconnectedness, well, a feedback loop determines how feedback and how different interactions by the removal, the introduction, or different actions that are taking, how does that influence systems within nature? There's two different types of feedback loops, positive and negative feedback loops. Now, when you hear the word positive, you think smiling, happy, good things are coming, not 2020. Okay? 2020, you just immediately think of it as a negative thing. Well, here's the thing that you need to break from your mind. Positive feedback does not mean good. Positive feedback means it's going to amplify the current process. And negative feedback is going to slow or retard the current process. So something that amplifies the current direction of the system, that's going to be positive feedback. Something that's going to slow, disrupt, and mess with the flow of the system, that is going to be negative feedback. So let's go through some examples here of different things, and we'll try to apply them to some ecological concepts. iPhones. I want to go sell an iPhone. How do we sell iPhones? Well, one, you just have to tell people about it. So iPhones, if you want someone to buy your iPhone, you make a commercial, you sell it, and people go, oh man, I have to have the newest iPhone, so people buy more iPhones. Positive feedback. Well, here's another thing that can happen though. Everyone goes out and buys that iPhone. Now, do you need another one? No, you don't. So market saturation is actually going to be negative feedback. So here you have positive feedback over here with the idea that people wanting to spread and sell more. And then you have negative feedback over here in that people have already got their iPhones and so they don't need more. So you can see how one amplifies the process of selling iPhones. One is going to slow the process of selling iPhones. How about this? Positive feedback loop for playing music. All right. If you enjoy playing music, you get motivated to play more. And as you play more, you get better at it. And when you get better at it, you get more satisfaction from playing music. So it keeps amplifying the process. So you're going to keep playing more and more and more. Well, what if you don't really like to play music? All right. What if you don't really have the motivation? Well, then you kind of play a little, but less and less and less. Or it starts to mean that you get worse and worse at playing. And then you really get frustrated and you don't want to play anymore. So you slow down the process of playing music. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, let's put this to ecological terms. Negative feedback in ecological terms. We're going to get here. We're going to get to climate change later on in the year. All right. But I'm just going to keep kind of hitting you with the topic over and over again until by the time at the end of the year, it'll just be like a little review video. Carbon dioxide is linked to climate change. Increased carbon dioxide in the atmosphere increases the greenhouse effect. It makes the planet warmer, which means that we're going to have increased evaporation. Remember, we talked about the water cycle. If you don't know the water cycle, please pause this video and go back to the other ones and watch the water cycle, which you probably don't need to, but hopefully not. Increased evaporation means increased clouds. Increased clouds, they're going to block incoming solar radiation. It's going to decrease the temperature, which is going to bring us back to an equilibrium. This is the cure for climate change, right? Well, unfortunately, we have so many other things going on that this increasing of carbon dioxide is not the true answer. Carbon dioxide is also then preventing infrared radiation from leaving, so it's kind of doing many things. So it's both a negative and positive. All right, now look at it. Here's a positive feedback for climate change. Ice is melting. Okay? Ice on the planet is melting. Snow is melting. Snow is really reflective. It's something called albedo. We're going to talk about it later in the year. But if we melt white snow and we turn it to earth and material or water, it's going to absorb more solar energy. As it absorbs more solar energy, the land and the planet get warmer. So melting of snow and ice is actually going to make the planet warmer. Positive feedback. All right, these are positive feedbacks that are going on. It's amplifying this process. Do you understand the difference between feedback loops? Hopefully. Now, again, food webs show that connection. When we look at food webs, we're looking at how all these pieces interact. And if we talk about how they all interact, what we're really also looking at is how do different things influence them or not. Back and forth, positive feedback, negative feedback, and how it all works together. Now, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to pause this video. I'd like you to open up this PowerPoint. I'd like you to watch this video about feedback loops. When you're all done, hopefully you feel good. Now, at the end of this lesson, can you accurately describe the different differences between a food chain and a food web? Do you understand the arrows and the energy flow through an ecosystem? Can you look at a food web and maybe interpret a keystone species? Do you know what a keystone species is? Do you understand what an apex predator is? So far, hopefully, I'm getting a bunch of yeses from you. It's kind of weird to talk into a camera, but hopefully something is resonating with you. And then, if you've got those basics of food chains and food webs down, go to feedback loops. Do you understand a feedback loop? Do you know the difference between positive feedback and negative feedback? Do you understand that positive just means it's going to be amplifying that process, and negative is going to be slowing or going against the direction of flow of that process? If you are good with that, that is awesome. That is fantastic. That means you are set and done with unit number 1. If not, send me an email. All right, we're going to get you through this. Now, hopefully you're feeling good. Hopefully you're like, all right, I'm feeling like I can do this AP Environmental Science curriculum. Unit 1, no big deal. All right. If so, I'm looking forward to joining you at Unit 2 next time, where we're going to start to delve into more biodiversity concepts. In the meantime, have a great one, and I look forward to seeing you next time.
You like that lesson? I know you did. So why don't you go ahead and smash that like button right now. Go ahead and comment. Tell all your friends about how great that lesson was. And make sure you subscribe, because I'm going to keep bringing you AP environmental content that you're going to want to watch. Or do whatever else those other YouTube channels tell you to do. And with that, Maloney, out.